The Galactic Empire's ultimatum arrived without warning. A massive dreadnought loomed over Earth, its shadow stretching across continents. The message, broadcast in hundreds of languages, was clear: surrender unconditionally, or be annihilated. The voice of the Imperial Overlord dripped with contempt, as if humanity was nothing more than an inconvenience to be crushed. The galaxy watched, expecting the same outcome that had played out countless times before. In the war room of a high-security bunker, Earth's leaders listened in silence. Military officials whispered among themselves, eyes filled with dread. The Empire's fleet was unmatched. Thousands of systems had fallen without resistance. The logical choice was submission. Yet, amid the rising panic, one voice remained steady. Ambassador Adrian Kane sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled in thought. He had studied the Empire for years, dissected their campaigns, and understood their arrogance. Surrender was not survival, it was subjugation. The Empire did not rule with diplomacy, it ruled with extermination. There would be no treaties, no concessions, only servitude or extinction. Kane had already made his decision. The countdown ticked away. Earth's leaders turned to Kane, expecting negotiations, desperate for a miracle. But Kane was not interested in peace. He activated a secure channel, transmitting directly to the Imperial flagship. The Overlord appeared on the screen, his reptilian features twisted in amusement. A decision already? Good. Perhaps your species isn't as primitive as I thought. Kane's expression remained unreadable. His voice was calm, unwavering. Your demand is rejected. The Overlord blinked, his amusement flickering into irritation. You understand what this means? Yes, Kane replied. It means war. A moment of silence. Then laughter. The Overlord's voice echoed across the transmission. You are bold, human, and foolish. You have no fleet, no empire. Your world will be reduced to ash before your defiance reaches anyone's ears. Kane didn't flinch. That's where you're wrong. With emotion, he cut the transmission. The war room erupted into chaos. Military commanders demanded explanations. Others accused Kane of condemning the planet. He ignored them all. This was not a debate. It was survival, and survival required ruthlessness. Execute Protocol Ragnarok, he ordered. Across the planet, hidden installations came online. Orbital defense platforms powered up, cloaked warships revealed themselves from deep space hiding. Humanity had never been defenseless, it had simply been underestimated. And that mistake would cost the Empire dearly. The countdown reached 0. The first shots were fired. The war had begun. The Empire's fleet advanced with the cold precision of a machine. Plasma lances seared through the void, targeting Earth's defenses with mathematical efficiency. On every world the Empire had conquered, this moment had been the end. No resistance had ever lasted beyond the first strike. But this time was different. The first wave of energy blasts hurtled toward Earth's orbital defenses, only to flicker and die against invisible barriers. The Empire had assumed Earth's shields would be primitive, but Kane had ensured they were anything but. Reverse-engineered from captured alien technology, humanity's defense grid absorbed the assault and returned fire with brutal accuracy. The Empire's forces hesitated. They had expected an execution. Instead, they had met resistance. Then came the next surprise. Across the battlefield, the Empire's targeting systems faltered. Weapons misfired, navigation systems glitched, command chains broke. The Empire's war doctrine relied on absolute control, but now, their forces were blind. Earth cyber warfare units had infiltrated their systems, rewriting battle algorithms in real time. Their ships were no longer machines of war, they were drifting metal coffins. Before the Empire could recover, humanity struck. Stealth ships emerged from hidden positions, launching precise kinetic bombardments that tore through Imperial formations. Unlike other species, humans fought unpredictably. There was no rigid structure, no patterns to decipher. To the Empire, it was chaos. To humanity, it was war. Inside the Imperial dreadnoughts, the real nightmare unfolded. Human boarding parties moved with terrifying efficiency, breaching hulls and flooding corridors with fire and steel. The Empire's soldiers, bred for rank-and-file combat, faltered against adversaries who adapted in seconds. Every encounter was a massacre. The reports spread fast. Soldiers whispered of humans who fought without fear, who used the environment itself as a weapon, who laughed as they slaughtered their foes. One Imperial admiral, watching the feeds, paled. "They're monsters," he muttered. The Overlord received the reports with growing disbelief. No species had ever resisted like this. No species had ever taken the offensive. This was supposed to be a lesson in obedience, yet now, it was the Empire that was bleeding. Kane watched it all unfold from the command center. He had no illusions. This was only the beginning. The Empire would regroup, adapt. But so would humanity. This was not a battle for survival. It was the first strike in a war of annihilation. The Empire had come to break humanity. Instead, it had awakened something far worse. The Empire reeled from the unexpected resistance, but shock quickly turned to rage. The Overlord, humiliated by the losses, abandoned all pretense of control. If humanity would not kneel, then it would burn. The order was given: total planetary bombardment. No negotiations, no half measures. Every human colony, every outpost, every trace of defiance would be erased. The first targets were the outer settlements. Orbital platforms melted under relentless fire, entire cities vanished in moments. Billions perished as entire planets were reduced to nothing but glass and silence. The Empire's wrath was absolute, a force of destruction that had ended countless civilizations. This time, it was personal. But humanity had anticipated this. Earth was never meant to be the final battlefield. As the bombardment began, evacuation protocols were executed with brutal efficiency. Civilians disappeared into deep space colonies, entire populations relocated in days. What the Empire struck was not a living world, but a ghost. The land was scorched before the enemy could take it. Every city, every resource, every trace of humanity was wiped clean by human hands. There would be nothing left for the invaders but ashes and regret. The Empire's forces moved in, expecting surrender. Instead, they found a trap. Across occupied systems, hidden warheads detonated, consuming entire fleets in fire. Ships that had landed found themselves stranded, their fuel depots sabotaged, their supplies poisoned. The battlefield was not just space, it was every city, every street, every ruin. Humanity had turned the very act of conquest into a death sentence. But the war was no longer just about battles. Humanity understood something the Empire did not: fear was the greatest weapon. Across the galaxy, whispers spread of a species that did not die, that did not break, that turned war into an art of vengeance. Imperial soldiers, once the masters of terror, now feared the darkness, afraid of the unseen enemy that struck without warning and left nothing behind but destruction. On Imperial worlds, the cracks deepened. Enslaved species watched humanity's defiance and began to question their own chains. Rebellions sparked across occupied territories. What had once been unthinkable was now inevitable. The Empire was losing control, not just of the war, but of its own people. Kane saw the shift and knew the moment had come. This war would not end with a battle. It would end with a decapitation strike. The Empire's heart had to be ripped out. A team was assembled. The mission was simple: infiltrate the Imperial capital. Kill the Overlord. Broadcast his death to the galaxy. The Empire believed itself untouchable. That illusion was about to be shattered. The Imperial capital had never been breached. It was a fortress world, protected by the strongest fleet, the most advanced defenses, and an unbreakable security network. The Overlord ruled from a throne built on the submission of 1,000 species, convinced of his own invincibility. He had seen rebellions crushed, enemies vaporized, entire civilizations erased with a single command. Humanity was meant to be another name on that list. Instead, it had become a nightmare that refused to end. Kane and his team infiltrated the capital under the cover of chaos. The Empire was unraveling. Military forces stretched thin, rebellions erupting on occupied worlds, entire sectors refusing orders. The Overlord had underestimated the disease of doubt, and now it was consuming his empire from within. The security forces still loyal to him were fighting a war on 1,000 fronts. They never saw the final strike coming. The palace was breached without warning. Elite guards, trained to fight conventional threats, were slaughtered before they could react. Every path to the throne room was paved with blood. Kane moved with precision, no wasted motion, no hesitation. This was not an assassination. This was an execution. The Overlord stood defiant, towering over Kane, his voice still laced with the arrogance of a ruler who had never known fear. "You think killing me will change anything?" he sneered. "I am the Empire. I cannot die." Kane raised his weapon. "That's the problem," he said. "You still think this is about you." The shot was broadcast across the galaxy. One moment, the Overlord ruled over trillions. The next, he was a corpse. The symbol of imperial dominance shattered in an instant. What followed was inevitable. The Imperial fleet, already weakened, fractured completely. With no central command, entire armadas turned on each other, warlords rising from the ruins. Planetary governors, once loyal, now saw an opportunity for power. The great empire that had ruled with an iron fist for centuries collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Humanity did not offer peace. There were no negotiations, no terms of surrender. Every last remnant of the empire was hunted down and destroyed. No mercy. No survivors. The galaxy had been given its warning. Humanity did not forgive, and it did not forget. In the aftermath, Kane stood on the bridge of Earth's new flagship, watching the stars. The war was over, but humanity's place in the galaxy had been decided. No longer the hunted. No longer the prey. The message was clear. The galaxy had demanded humanity's surrender. Humanity had replied with war. And it had won.